So, there's been some news. Andrew, and this is Gayties Toys. So, on this next installment of MIA 80s Ladies, where we do a sub-series of all the women we never got from Kenner's superpowers, we're delving into three characters, two of which are amongst just my absolute favorites in comicdom generally, as well as characters who I think really lend themselves to, how manufacturers make toys. We'll get back to that later. But in the meantime, let's just get right into the birds of prey, i.e. Batgirl, Huntress, and Black Canary. We've already discussed Kenner's Superpowers collection, history in other videos ad nauseum at this point. I can sort of start off easily and say that none of these three characters were part of Kenner's pitch, were part of, discussions as far as we know. It's very likely, I would say, especially Batgirl, would be sort of, in the mix eventually, would be sort of, on the docket, but we don't have any memos or proof stating otherwise. As it stands then, as now, Wonder Woman was the only woman made for the Superpowers line. Batgirl herself is the name of many, many characters, not unlike Robin or Wonder Girl. The first was Beth Kane, who was, alongside Batwoman, was a response to accusations that Batman and Robin were gay, and also had quite the age difference, which no one seems to really have a problem with. They were deemed pretty silly and were phased out very quickly because, frankly, the two characters were more of a nuisance to Batman and Robin and actually made them look more gay in comparison. Easily the most popular, recognizable Batgirl is Barbara Gordon, who made her first appearance in Detective Comics 359 in 1967, and also the 1960s Batman series that same time period. It was long assumed that she was created for the series, and then DC Comics sort of brought her on, not unlike Harley Quinn would, be set up many years later. It really seems more like this was a bit of a joint collaboration between the studio and the publisher. So, nevertheless, she exploded onto the scene. Her first comic book appearance, she was basically going to a costume party dressed as a gender-bent Batman, which was a thing even back then. And she, ended up foiling a plot by Killer Moth, who long became a villain associated with her, weirdly enough. Despite protestations by Batman and even Robin, Batgirl said, "I'm going to continue doing this anyway," and continue she did. One of the big reasons I really enjoy Barbara Gordon, say more so than Supergirl, is that Barbara really had, I feel like, a lot more going on. On top of being like a great acrobat, very much like reveling in the superhero life, she was very smart. She was very much a computer geek long before that was even really a thing. And on top of that, especially early on, she would sort of play on feminine tropes in battle. She would say like, "Oh, there's a run in my stockings. I'm too girly and weak to do this thing." And it was all distraction to make sure that villains, criminals would underestimate her, and she would sort of deliver the killing blow later. So very much someone who played with gender stereotypes and used them to her advantage, and I love that for her. Of course, probably the much more well-known and interesting thing, and something that they very much played with in the 1960s TV show, was that her secret identity was very, very much different than most other characters. She was the sometimes adopted daughter / niece of Commissioner Gordon. I think traditionally today she is the daughter of Jim Gordon. But it was that lying to the police commissioner, to her father, that really put a strain on her relationship. And likewise, that information, also threatened Batman and Robin. So, it really was like a potent, high stakes kind of secret identity. And that really kind of lends itself to her character. Although, frankly, in recent years, Jim Gordon has sort of hinted that. He probably knows. Around the time of Crisis on Infinite Earths in 1985, Batgirl would retire from being Batgirl, and she would, start her own career in politics. However, the Joker in the seminal Killing Joke comic book special would shoot her and paralyze her going forward. This was a bit of sparked a discussion on violence towards women, but also really kind of propelled her into the next stage of her career, where as a woman who was, suddenly, disabled, she took this opportunity to finally kind of really lean into her computer skills, and she became known as Oracle, a information broker, a computer hacker who was sort of, the DC universe known wide. Quickly doubling back to Black Canary, just so we can get a bit of a through line between the two characters. She's a much older character. She debuted back in Flash in 1947, that being the original Black Canary, Dinah Drake. The story of Black Canary is one that is very nebulous and evolving. It really sort of depends on what continuity or reboot or whatever universe we're currently living in within the DC universe. I think, sort of the generally accepted origin of her is that Black Canary is in fact two characters, one being her mother, who served with the Justice Society of America. Her daughter, Dinah Lance, would sort of be raised by them. It'd be raised by, the boxer Wildcat, and really sort of, come up in the superhero world. And despite having superhuman powers, this, just devastating canary cry, she really was more reliant on and more known for being just an absolute brawler, one of the best in the entire universe. Huntress is another character who is, let's say, two different people and has varied origins over the years. But to start with, probably the one I would, prefer to go with for superpowers, that being Helena Wayne. She was created in 1977, not long, before superpowers would kick off. She was from Earth 2, and she was the daughter of sort of the Golden Age Batman and Catwoman. She would, alongside Power Girl, who we also recently talked about, would be the dynamic duo of Earth 2. After Crisis on Infinite Earths, however, Huntress was no more. Earth 2 was no more. And that name really remained dormant for many, many years, up until late 1989, when the Huntress would be reimagined as Helena Bertinelli, who was the daughter of a mob family who was killed right in front of her. And she, almost kind of Batmaned herself into a living weapon to take revenge. Once she hit Gotham, she was a bit of a controversial figure. Batman, of course, wanting to sort of absorb all sidekicks under his wing. She was not having it, and she was very much not into his no-killing rule. Since Batman couldn't bring her to heel, Barbara Gordon was like, hold my beer, bitch. And so she looped in Huntress to be part of her Birds of Prey team, and the three of them really became sort of like a nucleus of the team. Huntress has since not exactly been, a charter member, but she's definitely much more associated with that team than, say, Batman's wider family. Likewise, with continuity, multiverse, yada yada, both versions of the characters are currently in play, albeit, it doesn't make things any less confusing. Again, none of these characters were really planned, to the best of our knowledge, for superpowers. They weren't even in sort of future waves that were, unveiled from Action Figure Insider's interviews since. If you remember from my Super Family video, I did sort of, have a kind of a tier ranking of characters, and I would argue that Batgirl was very much in the A tier alongside Catwoman and Supergirl. She's very much a brand onto herself and very bankable character, so I wouldn't be surprised to see her then or now. Likewise, Black Canary, outside of Wonder Woman, is really sort of one of the known, female Justice Leaguers. So again, someone who really is one of my, top contenders overall for, women that belong in superpowers. Huntress is a bit more of a weirder thing, so as you know, I use the style guide as my North Star when deciding which characters to include here. Huntress really only made an appearance on the cover of the very first style guide, that being the Helena Wayne version. The three of them, of course, now are collectively known as the Birds of Prey and would do well in this. Likewise, because of their costumes, because of the number of people who've worn said costumes, there's a lot of repaintability here. So, it's great for a toy company to get a mold and just keep churning that thing out. If you're here, you probably know this old tune. Of course, all three characters have a lot of figures since the Superpowers run, especially Batgirl. That said, there is a one-for-one sequel line now under McFarlane Toys called Superpowers. He's a little reticent to make other women other than really bad Wonder Woman repaints. So it's become a joke, it's become a farce, it's become infuriating, but there's been some news. McFarlane Toys' license with DC Comics generally was set to expire in sometime in 2026. So For a while, prior to Toy Fair 2025 in March, there was a lot of rumblings about other companies trying to, like, take the crown back. And some certain Toyotas were perhaps involved in those discussions. Um, just before Toy Fair hit, Mattel did finally, reveal that they had indeed won the license. I know McFarlane is still trying to retain some, that's still very much in discussions, but for now, Mattel, at some point in 2026, will be doing DC Comics action figures. Based off of, the rumor mill, the temperature in the room, a lot of people are sort of really like hopeful that Mattel will continue the Superpowers line or sort of start something new under, new management. Let's say Toyota, who already has a lot of these designs ready to roll. Currently, we just don't know. I mean, it's too early to say. They're probably very much in the planning stage. They don't really have anything to unveil and probably won't be able to unveil until they actually take the license back. But it is a very exciting time, and it is a very hopeful time where characters like Batgirl, Black Canary, and the rest could finally be made. In the meantime, however, Todd is still making superpowers, supposedly. And at this stage, he's not going to invest in a new buck for women. So, I mean, not likely. He might surprise us out of spite, you never know. But as it stands, we're everyone's kind of like looking towards the future. And so I think the future is bright for the ladies at long last. Nevertheless, this series will be long retired by the time this comes to fruition, so this video might not age well, we'll see. Nevertheless, I have high hopes, and if that doesn't plan out, I mean, there's plenty of customs out there. I mean, I've got the Multiversity Batgirl, she's spectacular. So if you are a little impatient or a little pessimistic about this, I would say go the custom route. But regardless, I thank you for watching. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, all those YouTube-y things, and I will see you next time on MIA 80s Ladies.